I would like to talk about this topic of resilience from, I would say, our maybe not personal, but our own historical perspective from the GRC. The title is a sort of from a concept to a compass. You'll see what it means, but then I'll also say a bit more about the GRC in general and some other sort of follow-up activities which are being done in the same group more or less these days to give you not just the narrow resilience perspective, but a bit more. So on the GRC, I don't know if some of you have attended the previous edition of this series, then some of these overview slides you have seen, but maybe others were not there. So the GRC is the internal science and knowledge service of the European Commission. It's one of the directorates general. Our main task is to do science for policy, to provide independent evidence-based knowledge and science, supporting EU policies to positively impact society along the entire policy cycle. The three keywords are anticipate, integrate, and impact. The GRC is fairly large. We are split also geographically. So our headquarters are in Brussels. Also, some of the scientific units or scientific activities are there in Brussels. But the biggest site is in Ispra, Italy, north of Milan. There are also units and directorates in Sevilla, Spain, Karlsruhe, Germany, Petten, Netherlands, and another small town in Belgium, Geel, around an hour from Brussels. The GRC in terms of numbers. Okay, we have a fairly large budget, but it's also a fairly large organization. We have around 3,000 staff. I think it also varies depending on how you count people. We have many physical research infrastructures. It's not as interesting from a social science perspective, but from a more hard science and engineering perspective, we have really interesting laboratories. We used to have even research reactors. They are no longer operational. Many open data sets, many models in the economic, but also in the biophysical and nuclear domains. So this is more or less what we do. We support commission services. Sometimes we also work directly with member states or selected member states or other stakeholders to provide evidence-based, to provide impact assessments, to provide methodological support. This is more or less what we do. If you have questions, maybe at the end, I'm more than happy to answer. And I didn't put there. Maybe at the last slide, I think I put there a website with some further information on the GRC, including a recruitment portal, because on a regular basis, the different parts of the GRC are having openings. These are typically 3+3 temporary positions, but can be very interesting depending on the topical fit. So let me then leave the general GRC presentation and put ourselves in a time machine. So this is from the Back to the Future. Actually, it will be now back to the past. And literally, because I digged up a presentation which we gave together with my colleague Jessica Cariboni. Even the date is there, a bit more than 6 years ago, February the 5th, 2020. You may notice that this was one of the last days before COVID. It was a commission internal seminar presenting our planned so-called flagship report on resilience. The title was Towards a More Resilient Society, Navigating a Challenging Future Together. Remember that at this point, there was no COVID yet, there was no Next Generation EU, there was no Recovery and Resilience Facility. So this was our sort of entry point into this entire conversation. What were we painting there? we were arguing that the general sort of narrative is that already by that time there was a huge need actually fed by people, fed by citizens for protection and strengths, because there were too many things changing and there were too many challenges arriving. But at the same time, historically, changes have often been the catalyst for societal development. So you should not and actually cannot eliminate them completely. So the question was, which we tried to answer, how to steer the future together to navigate successfully amidst all these old and emerging challenges. We referred to Melvin Kranzberg, a scholar of technological development, who has this very mysterious statement: technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. So it's the same about all challenges and all that is coming at us. That it's difficult to say whether they are good or bad, but they will have an effect. But that effect depends largely on us. It depends largely on how we steer things. So resilience in this context, we were painting it as the general sort of ability to thrive despite adversity. That's the very general concept. And then we were arguing that resilient society is one that can face shocks and persistent structural changes, so like climate change or demography or technological change, in a way that it does not lose its ability. And this is the main argument to deliver societal well-being in a sustainable way. So in a way that you're not eating up the resources of the future. You want to be able to cope with changes and challenges successfully in a way that you stay on track for our aspirations, you stay on track for the sustainable development path. You also want to be able to turn changes and challenges into opportunities. We were painting resilience even as an alternative political narrative, where it means complementing and sometimes even substituting strengths. This also a bit qualifies the topic of today's seminars, to complement strengths with flexibility. Foresight and resilience should be the key enablers for actively shaping the future through adaptation and transformation to benefit society and enable sustainable development. There is a famous by now historical quote originating from Japan, the famous bamboo tree, where in winter snow falls on the bamboo trees. You see the picture how they bend, but they never break. And come spring, and the trees start to grow straight again. So this is the substitution and complementing of strengths with flexibility. This was our foreseen publication, with a very interesting, I would say, even today, table of contents, bringing in the various conceptual elements and measurement elements of resilience, and then how you can operationalize, how you can measure it at the individual level, at the economic shocks level, climate change, disasters, conflicts, strategic security, their supply security, migration, population dynamics, and aging. And we were proposing very first dashboards of vulnerability and resilience. I would say that even looking back historically, for reasons I can explain, apart from technological change and digitization, these remain more or less the core areas of challenges and where resilience is being applied even these days. How did we arrive at this point? So this was the outcome of work for more than 3 years at that point. Around 2016, around 2017, we set out to bring resilient thinking into policies. What we meant is to focus on societal well-being, to go beyond aggregate policies, to go beyond single policy areas, to go beyond stability, this argument on flexibility. And we felt and we wanted to argue that resilience should link very strongly to foresight, strategic foresight, and to sustainability. And indeed, in 2020, just before COVID, the topic was, and the notion was adopted by the then forthcoming first strategic foresight report, which added one important ingredient: the focus on transitions. Because if you remember, the new 2019 first von der Leyen Commission was emphasizing the digital and the green transitions very strongly. So resilience is the ability not only to withstand and cope with challenges, but also to undergo transitions in a way that's good for society, which meant sustainable, fair, and democratic manner. An important, so a bit about the underlying concept. The link between well-being, sustainability, and resilience, and how it's been picked up. So resilience is about the ability to cope with challenges, and in the general dynamic well-being framework of the OECD, where there is the emphasis on current well-being and the resources for the future, for future, sustainability comes in as the need to meet also the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So to set aside resources, but if you don't make sure that those resources actually arrive there, and the various challenges can be a major obstacle, then you are not enabling well-being in the future. So resilience is important as an ingredient for sustainability, so that those resources do reach the future. And this was actually picked up in the second Stiglitz report, in this book in 2017, I believe, for good measure. And the OECD well-being framework was even adopted and adjusted at the time, so that the resources for future well-being are not only the capitals, but also the risk factors and resilience capacities. This is a chart where we try to illustrate this two-way link. And there is a link to a recent chapter which tried to make this even sort of more elaborate. That on the one hand, you need resilience to be able to deal with challenges, to stay around the sustainable development path. But at the same time, sustainability is, in our argument, the key sort of reference point for assessing whether a reaction to a shock is resilient. So imagine that you're on your original sustainable development path, and you're around this black dot here, and then a shock comes, and you want to compare whether the two societal responses, A and B, which is more resilient, which is better for society. Not seeing ahead, you may say that A actually comes with a smaller drop and recovers more quickly, so that is better. But if, say, in a couple of years, you realize that your original sustainable path was actually no longer sustainable, and the collapse comes, and the reaction A put you back to this unsustainable development path, and then you went down together, while path B somehow realized that a transformation, a transition is needed, and you need to get to new sustainable development paths, then actually path B will be better than path A. So to have the sustainable development path as the benchmark is also important when you want to assess whether a reaction to a shock is actually good or not so good for society. This dynamic coping with shocks needs to evoke various resilience capacities, namely stability, flexibility, and change or transformation, depending on the intensity, but also the duration of this shock. So if it's not so intense and it doesn't last too long, then it's more stability. You want to be able to absorb. If the intensity and the duration increases, you need to get to flexibility. You need to start adopting. You cannot just bounce back. You need to start bouncing forward, but without major drastic changes. And when the intensity becomes very severe and the duration, or actually both together, then you need a major change. You need transformation. Now, of course, all these need and can benefit from the support of policies. It's not only the capacities of individuals and communities, but also how these can be supported by policies, by various interventions, prevention, preparation, protection, promotion, and eventually transformation. And here we also depicted the changing emphasis as you move from the ex ante phase towards more and more intense disturbances. You need to go from the prevention preparation towards protection, eventually promotion, which facilitates adaptation, and eventually to transformation. A bit on this chapter which we had on individual resilience. It was based on one ad hoc Eurobarometer, which asked some specific questions which we borrowed and adopted from World Bank surveys on coping strategies of households. Imagine you have a major income loss. How would you cope it? And we offered a couple of strategies. And also there is a frequently adopted question: if something went wrong in your life, how quickly would it take to recover? And we also observed various psychological traits of individuals. So from these, the colleagues combined or compiled an individual resilience index, which then you could analyze across countries and also try to understand whether how it depends on age, how it depends by gender and so on, and education. And we were also trying to see if indeed resilience of individuals linked to resilience of communities, and what roles government should play in boosting or helping the resilience of citizens. The next important thing which we did back then was to think about the measurement of resilience, because this is essentially about how you deal with the shock, how you react to a shock. So the best indicator should be that you observe an entity. It could be an individual, but it could also be a region or a country or a community in times of difficulty. This is what we were labeling as indicators of revealed resilience. When you look at the shock, and then you see how much a certain country, and this is what this chart tries to show here, how much, say, its economic production, but it can be quality of life or life satisfaction, or it can be employment, how much it worsened, how quickly it recovered, and did it recover completely, or maybe did it even bounce forward in a sense that it came to a better than previous level. And ideally, this should be assessing whether an individual or whether a country is indeed resilient. But this is not really something actionable, and this you don't observe regularly. This you observe only when you have a shock. So what you would like is somehow to uncover those characteristics, those features of these individuals or of countries. In this exercise, we did it for countries that can predict that if a country has, for example, a good welfare state overall or has good institutions, then if a shock comes, it will be able to cope with it better. This is, in a sense, what most practical resilience measurement systems do, that it's a sort of an expert consensus that people get together, and based on their practical experience, they say that yes, institutional quality we believe is important for resilience. But the question is, do you have evidence that indeed countries with a better institutional setting or any other characteristics were doing systematically better in an observed crisis? So this is what we try to do in this specific article. We looked at how EU member states did during the 2007-8-12 financial and economic crisis, and then we were looking at these characteristics, the pre-crisis predictors of better performance. This is the way countries did in terms of these revealed resilience characteristics. So dark blue means that country had a lower impact. So it's, I don't know, overall economic, socioeconomic indicators worsened less. The middle, the recovery is how quickly they recovered. The medium run is over a couple of years horizon how much they recovered, and the bounce forward is sort of taking an even longer perspective whether they managed to even get better than they originally were. You see that there are some differences, and the differences are not the same along these different notions. So like some countries are better in impact and they are not necessarily better in the recovery. And then we run these exploratory regressions to come up with characteristics. For example, expenditures on social protection was one of the most robust predictor of a smaller impact. So countries which had better welfare states before the crisis, not during, but before the crisis, they were able to have a smaller impact on their economies. Then came the strategic foresight report, and then I may need to point back to this flagship report, which I was looking for, which I was pointing to, because I cannot put any link to it because it was in a sense absorbed into the strategic foresight report, although it's 150 pages was absorbed in 3 paragraphs. So we had to sort of abandon releasing that report, not to create I don't know confusion on the content of the foresight report. But this was actually painting resilience as the new compass, and actually this was eventually the birth also of the of this Horizon Consortium. We're meeting in the context of. It was arguing for strategic foresight to inform policies to strengthen EU resilience. It was arguing for measurement in 4 interrelated dimensions: social and economic, green, digital, and geopolitical, and was announcing the creation of the resilience dashboards. Now, these were a collection of existing indicators, again at the country level, maybe later, and indeed we did it possible at the regional level. The thing is not to talk about progress. It's not about whether countries are doing better or not, or how they did during the crisis, but it's really their ability to make progress amidst challenges. So it's their vulnerabilities and it's their capacities. It took a holistic perspective, so not concentrating on specific dimensions or domains or policy fields, and try to be as forward-looking as statistics can be, because statistics are typically about the present, not about the future. It had these 4 dimensions, and we also created, and I'm not showing the full sort of colored carpets of the 4 dimensions, because each dimension has more than 30 indicators. So it's a total of 120. So we compiled summary indices by vulnerability and capacity, by the dimensions, and eventually, after 2 years, we even created an overall index. So what you see is, as you go from the dark orange to dark blue, it indicates better situation. In the vulnerabilities, it means less vulnerabilities. In capacities, it means better capacities. So what you see on the one hand is there are quite some variation among countries. There is quite some variation between vulnerabilities and capacities, but also there is variation within the dimensions. So some countries are better in the social economic, but at the same time weaker in the digital. You could also try to look at over time. We have only a couple of years, and you would also see some time series variation. The last application of this resilience framework came a couple of years after. I don't know how much you're aware. There was a reform of the economic governance system, essentially the European semester and the Stability and Growth Pact, and how EU countries should be planning their medium-run fiscal paths. And there, resilience again was given a very important role. So this new regulation was arguing that one needs rules so that these medium-term fiscal structure plans can promote sound and sustainable public finances, sustainable and inclusive growth, and resilience through reforms and investments. And these plans should explain how they will address fair, green, and digital transition, social and economic resilience, including the European Pillar of Social Rights, energy security, and then it was already bringing in defense. So essentially, it is important to have new evidence and tools to evaluate the medium long-term impacts of various investments and reforms on economic variables, but also on structural resilience of EU socio-economic systems to future shocks. So this is how far we've gotten. Let me then quickly just show a couple of specific topics which then this group, when sort of the resilience measurement, the dashboards have been sort of achieved and adopted as much as they've been adopted. So one topic which we are looking at these days is poverty dynamics across Europe, where by poverty dynamics we mean not only to look at whether somebody is poor in a single year, but poor in multiple years. Ideally, you would like to look at, I don't know, even 10 years and to see if people are in poverty for 2-3 years out of 10 or all years of out of 10 or only less than that. It's not always easy because the Silk panel allows only 4 years. But already this shows that there is quite some variation, both in terms of the persistence of poverty within a country, but also across countries. You can also look at the entry and exit. Around 1/3 of those who are poor now were not poor in the previous years and will not be poor in the next year. And this can very easily lead to a resilience type question: is how people end up landing in poverty. Is that something because they cannot cope with various shocks, and how they manage? Can they escape? Are they resilient to these shocks? So this is a very sort of natural continuation at the individual level, but with a very different perspective still of the resilience topic. A second topic which grew out from our work on resilience and on measurement is beyond GDP, to track the EU's sustainability transition and its performance in a global comparison. And we are just about to release some results on comparing the EU and the US. In terms of GDP performance, the US is known to be better. But once you bring in elements like life expectancy or inequalities, or even look at life satisfaction and other ingredients, it's very easy to change this comparison. So the yardstick matters a lot for these well-being comparisons. Next topic, and that again can link to make it strong, is addressing the housing crisis. What colleagues have been looking at is a database on housing stocks, housing demand, and housing prices at a very local, regional level, and also assess the overall housing needs. What you see on the left is how uneven, even within countries, but also across countries, the housing needs are. And in some countries, the housing stock is sufficient, while in some others there is a huge investment need, and this will be a major issue in the future. And last but not least, to look at, and that again grew out from one of the indicators of our resilience dashboards, the consumption footprint. So look at its inequality, look at its distribution. How much do the higher income groups contribute to these environmental damages? And what we see is indeed the top income quintile has a more than proportionate correspondence to the or contribution to the environmental footprint, but also the bottom quintile has a fairly important footprint in itself. So to decrease environmental damages, we need both a change in lifestyles, especially at the top of the income distribution, but at the same time a major shift in the way we produce our goods and services.